Hey, hey, everyone. Welcome back to On the Edge. I am Rayanne Thorn Krueger. I am the host of this wonderful broadcast. I don't like calling it a podcast because it's more than audio, but it is also available on audio as well. So without further ado, I want to introduce my guest. This is Jenifer Cotie Kangas. Did I say that correctly, first of all?
You did say that correctly. Yes, Jenifer Cotie Kangas, and thank you so much for having me here today.
Oh, I'm so happy that you could join me today. This was not a last minute, but almost a last minute request to have you hop on today because there has been some fluff and stuff happening over on LinkedIn throughout an industry that you and I are part of. And it kind of heated up a little bit more recently. And then Bennett, my good friend Bennett, who launched On the Edge with me, suggested that I take a look at a post that happened, I think Monday or Tuesday, that was about what we're going to talk about today. And it prompted me to reach out to Jenny, or JCK, as she is affectionately known by. And so before we get started, though, Jenny, I would love for you to introduce yourself and then tell us a little bit about Operation Purple Light.
Yeah. So my name is Jenifer Cotie Kangas, or JCK. I am a Chief Solution Architect. And what that means really is that in the world that I play in, which is HR tech, which is also where Rayanne and I know each other originally from, there's a lot of technology that exists, and a lot of people buy different technology solutions. I'm the partner that helps you put those together and do a cohesive experience and learn how to do the program management side. And the way that we got connected for this conversation is I have a side project or a passion project, something that's really important to me, called Operation Purple Light. And Operation Purple Light is a collective of mission-driven individuals who want to take, again, those technology solutions that we play with on a day-to-day basis with building cohesive, user experiences for organizations, and redeploy them for something they haven't been used for before, which is making in-person events safer. And what I mean by in-person events is I'm somebody who speaks a lot at different conferences and attends a lot of different conferences. And sometimes at these conferences, bad things can happen. And so it's a world of I should probably pause for a second. One unique thing about me, I hit my head in 2020 and I remember nothing before it. And so when I experienced my first not so great situation in person, I was assaulted by somebody I knew. The response of that's just how it happens in the industry. And that's just the price of, being in the inner circle.
Telling you this, or others telling you? Oh,
yeah, that just didn't sit with me, right? I was like, well, what do you mean? What do you mean that? So I'm going to pause there because I've been talking a lot and allow Rayanne to ask any questions.
Well, I am so glad that you agreed to speak with me about this. I've written about my experiences. I have multiple experiences, and a recent one that happened to me, not at a work event, but I think that what we're talking about can benefit women, some men, that experience abuse even on the street, or harassment on the street in a parking lot. It happened to me recently in a Target parking lot. And it always leaves me so shocked. For one thing, I'm old, right? So I'm old. I'm unloading stuff into my car in a Target parking lot. So I'm there with my shopping cart. I'm there with my old ladiness, and I'm not that old, but I have to set it up. So it's just always shocking to me. And it would seem that at this point in my life, I would have a response ready. And I think I do now. I think I have a response. I think I'm ready now if it happens again, because I'm talking about it more. It's more front and center for me. But when it happens, what you said about it's just the way it is. People will be people. When you work closely with people, they feel comfortable, and you got to go along to get along, right? And that phrase just keeps coming back to me more and more and more, and it haunts me because of my really bad experiences that I've had. I feel very lucky. I have not been raped that I know of. That said, I have been drugged twice at industry conferences, once at a party for a friend. So drugged 3 times in my life in the last 20 years, let's say 20 years, 20 plus years. And every time it's been like a 7-year break between them. And so I don't know if it's me letting my guard down. And that's what I want to talk about is the what we say always puts the focus back on the victim, right?
Yeah.
On us. What we say, how people respond to us always turns it back to, well, what were you wearing? Were you alone? Were you drinking? Had you done drugs? Were you being gregarious? Were you flirting? Was cleavage showing? All of these things that come back. And even my own mother said to me, well, maybe you shouldn't be traveling alone anymore. And for me, that's so much shame to put on somebody who has been traumatized. Right. And not my fault. Not my fault that I was traumatized. And what you said is so important because I think that's what happens to individuals who feel it's okay to do this to us, to women, and I know, and I don't want to piss anybody off by saying it's that it only happens to women, because I do know some men that this has happened to, that abuse has happened to. And
well, it's been surprising actually, like the amount of people who've reached out. They're like, these males, like I was drugged. Somebody tried to, tried to take advantage of me at a bar. They drugged me and then they took advantage. Like just like the amount of different things that have happened,
right.
even for the men too. But then there's even more so shame on that side, because it's like, well, I'm a man, like I'm a
man, right?
straight man, and like it's just like the amount of shame that's there. And I apologize. I have a 8-foot whiteboard to my right, and there's a couple
Yeah,
different
no
things
problem
here. But what is that? Courage is contagious, so is cowardice. That was one piece that I had written down. And the biggest thing was like, when something happens, we guard ourselves by like changing our own personal, like how we're going about things. Like when I went to HR Tech last year, I had a scrunchie that had a built-in drink cover in it, right? Because last year, the year prior, so 2022 at HR Tech, I got roofied at an after party. And I wasn't even drinking. I was drinking water. And somebody, I know now it was a bartender, but had put, drugs into my drink. And so I had my own like thing that like helped me be able to go through that and protect me. But one of the hard things that I've noticed with this entire situation as I've dug into it more is we protect ourselves with like how we modify actions, but it's almost like it's been taboo to talk about that stuff. And so in not talking about it, we're not protecting the community, because if I don't know what's happening, right? Like, and I can't, help somebody else understand like, hey, this is what you need to be aware of. This is what you need to look out for.
Yeah, I didn't talk about the first time. I didn't talk about it. I didn't talk about the 5 men that were at the table. One of them did it. They're all people that we know today, and one of them did it. And I didn't talk about it because I put the shame on myself. How did I let this happen? And so this is the thing that is so interesting to me through all of this, is not just everything that you've just mentioned, but more so how we go past this now. How can we say it's unacceptable? First of all, it's a crime, right? What has happened to us, what has been done to us, what has made us a victim is a crime.
And just to clarify, what we're talking about is assault. We're talking about rape. We're talking about druggings. We're talking about situations where consent is not established. Yes.
Simple harassment, having your ass grabbed, having somebody flick your boob, which both of those things have happened to me at an HR event. And my brain kind of went to a place that I didn't realize it was going to. When COVID hit, I don't have to go. I don't have to go to these conferences anymore. And I didn't realize this was happening to me until I got into a deep conversation with Bennett about it, that I did not realize that I had put myself in a place of protection. And then I was using COVID as an excuse to not go. I haven't been back to an event since pre-COVID. I haven't been back. And the last drugging, the most current drugging, the one that I finally broke my silence and wrote about, was in 2016. So that's how long it's been. I wrote about it when I could, when I finally had the wherewithal, because it was very traumatic for me. And it hurt my body. I was very sick for many months. And I broke my toe it's a whole story. And, I'll share my post in the comments of this broadcast. But so let's talk about, and I'm sorry that happened to you, Jenny.
I'm so sorry it happened to you too. Just to be 100% clear, these things should not happen. Not because, just full stop, just like a period, not a comma. They just should not happen. And I'm so sorry that happened to you.
It's really, I don't know how your wake up was from it, but from the one that happened to me in 2007, I woke up in a dark hotel room. I didn't know how I got there. I had a shoe missing. I was covered in vomit, right? I had no idea how I got there. I was on the couch in a suite. Nobody was in there. I was in there by myself. There was a trash can next to it, like I had been barfing in it. And I don't remember any of this, none of it. Right. So this is happening to women all the time, and some men. It's happening at these events, not just the events in our industry. And I want to be clear, our industry is HR, recruiting technology, and HR technology. All organizations that are meant to help and benefit people, right?
Make people safe at work. Create more level playing fields, right? Like these are the things that we focus on as an industry.
We talk about equity. We talk about equality. We talk about evening the playing field. And we also go along to get along. And we have for decades. We have forever. I'm not gonna even limit it to a decade or two. It's been since the beginning of time that women have, because we are perceived as not as strong, smaller in stature. Some of us are lucky enough to be not small in stature. And it's just in our makeup because of how we were raised. Stay out of those situations.
You're socially conditioned to put up with
strangers. If you do any of these things, it's your fault, right?
Well, and it can go against you for your job. And a lot of the times the people who are doing this are saying like, oh, that person will ruin your career if you say something, or like they are threatening physical safety, which is the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Because Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a triangle. There's different layers. Yes, basic functional piece. And especially for women who have had to work harder to be in the workforce, right? Like some of us are coming back after being home with kids. There's so many different things that could potentially, somebody could discredit our own, value or what we bring to the table. And it's created this breeding ground of this behavior existing and continuing to exist because it's not being challenged. So for whatever reason it existed to like prior, like we got to just pause, say like it's for whatever reason it was, right? But we can continue going forward in a way that's going to protect people or to mitigate or, prevent some of this to happening in the future, right? Because just because it has been that way doesn't mean it should be that way.
No,
right?
and we need to work hard to change it. And we need women who maybe haven't had this experience happen to them to stand up for women who have, and more so men which has been probably the most shocking thing to me is when I have seen posts by men that have said, I'm so surprised this has happened in our industry or in any industry. And to give you like a baseline example from 20, 30 years ago, if we think about women in law enforcement, right? And what they've had to endure to be a part of that community, the law enforcement community. So female cops, dispatchers, women that work in administration for law enforcement agencies have had to deal with harassment and also workplace bullying, shaming, right? And if they do happen to hook up with a cop, then they have to deal with shaming after that. And if it's consensual, and a woman that fights back in law enforcement in particular, and I know of 2 situations personally, they are badmouthed and are blocked and have backdoor horrible references for them. So they cannot go and work at another agency because they have either sued a department or have left a department and badmouthed it, right? So this is an extreme of what we're talking about, right? But women in the industry that you and I work in and in every other industry has had to deal with, I mean, you can think of many, construction, right? Anybody that works in engineering, and our industry in particular that has several conferences a year or Christmas parties, right? Anybody that goes to a Christmas party or a monthly happy hour for your organization, or walking to the parking garage at night or to the parking lot. So what are some ways, and I know that Operation Purple is heading in that direction, but are there any that you've come across since we've been talking about this for the last few weeks, more so than in past? What are some ways that not women can make themselves safe, but organizations and men can help keep women safe? And event organizers.
Absolutely. So I think the biggest thing that I've come through in my research on this is like the need for allyship. And what I mean for allyship is if you see something, say something, right? Your lens of the situation or what you're reading, yeah, it might be wrong. That person might be okay. But it's the situations that are more often than not, that person is not okay. Like the victim is not okay. And just being able to pause or be able to interrupt that situation by just saying like, hey, something's not right here, right? Like, are you okay? It's so important. And one of the blessings that I have based on my memory loss is I don't have the social conditioning of like, oh, you're not supposed to do that, right? So like if I see something, I'm like, hey, chances are it might not be anything, but like if it is something, then I said something, right? And so being able to overcome kind of the yellow light syndrome that happens where you're kind of overthinking, like if your gut tells you something might be going on, just raise your hand or go and ask the question or flag to the bartender or to the bouncer or to something, right?
The problem is, and I'm going to stop you right there, because we are conditioned, especially in hospitality, a hospitality situation like an expo, a conference, a party, a happy hour, to trust service providers, whether it's an Uber driver, a bartender, anybody that works in hospitality that has access to a key or a location where we might be, whether it's, and I've been in a situation where service providers stole phones of people that were, they saw a phone, they were waiters and they saw a phone sitting on a table and they were supposed to be serving this party that was paid for. They were stealing phones, right? So it is so important for us to see beyond what we've been conditioned to see, right? Is this consensual? I can remember a SHRM party in particular in Atlanta. It was huge. It was I think it was Glassdoor. I don't want to say, shouldn't say names. I can't remember who sponsored it. I can't remember who exactly sponsored it, but it was a huge party. Every influencer for sure was there. And I saw several dark corners where individuals were engaged in activity that could have been deemed dangerous, whether it was drinking too much, doing drugs, or participating in publicly open sexual activity.
Can we just like, so I live in Minnesota, which is like super like Minnesota nice. We tend to be very passive aggressive, like as a collective in general. I don't really come across, for example, drugs in my day to day, nor have I ever. And like the first time I was offered cocaine at an after party, I was like, I'm sorry, am I unpunked? Like, are you kidding? Does this actually happen outside of like the TV shows that I watch? Like, I was blown away, shocked. And then, like you said, it's with people that you trust. And it just like, I mean,
Yeah.
just it blew my mind. I had no idea that that was something that like actually happened, as silly as that sounds. But then I was like, oh, but everybody else is going along with it. So I'm not going to say anything, right? I'm not going to do it. But also like, I'm not going to challenge it or like say anything about it because it clearly like everybody's okay with it, right? Like it was absolutely mind blowing to me that that occurred. So I don't know if anybody else is watching this is like, oh yeah, that doesn't really happen. I'm telling you,
Yeah,
it happens and it's shocking.
Yeah, I was at in Vegas, which is where all good things happen.
A lot of things that are not so great happen. Yeah.
Yeah, and on a dance floor with a lot of my colleagues, and it was just fun. We were just having fun, and somebody turned and offered me X, and I didn't know what it was. I was like, what? What? Yeah, no, you got to take this. It's great. And I went, I'm out. Walked off the dance floor. I'm out. I'm not even going to be involved in this. I was like you, shocked, like definitely looked around for cameras. What's going on? How do I explain this? First of all, to my employer who paid my way,
Right.
That's
well, I think that's the behavior we have to normalize. Is like we need to normalize, like, I'm not okay with this. That's not okay, right? I'm not going to do that, like, and being able to walk away from it, because I feel like that behavior hasn't been normalized. We've normalized just going along with it, or, like, oh, I'll just do it this once because everybody along with me is doing it, right? Like, that's not the right thing. And so I think if we're looking at what are some of the actionable ways that we can help to, to change the narrative on this is making sure that we're normalizing saying no.
I should have said and looked at the other women that were there with me. Are you uncomfortable with this? Because if you are, let's go. Instead, I left. And then I worried about the other women, but then I thought, well, they chose to stay. They chose to participate. Right. So what are some of the actionable ways? It is seeing something, saying something. It is, as a conference or event organizer, recognizing that there is potential for this to happen and not burying your head in the sand and saying, well, it's the attendee's responsibility. It's making sure there aren't dark corners where things like this can happen. It's making sure that areas where people are congregating are either well lit, or there's a service person close by, or the organizer has security. Why not have security that they're in particular watching for this, right? Why not hire a couple of security guys, off-duty cops that can walk through? It would cost nothing. It would cost next to nothing, right? To have.
Well, and I think one thing that I've done with my friends since this happened is, like, in business, we often do what we refer to as like a pre-mortem. So like, how could this go wrong? Where could I how could we screw up this project or this implementation of Workday or Oracle or whatever, right? Like we're modeling through how could this go wrong. And so some of my girlfriends and I at these conferences have started to pre-mortem, where could this go wrong, and what are we comfortable with and what are we not comfortable with? And being able to have that conversation and establish what your guardrails are, hard and soft, before it happens, I think is a really important piece too. Because if if Rayanne and I are at a conference together and we're like, hey, in the event that drugs come out, we're out. And here's a signal that we're going to give each other to let them know, like, we're just going to I'm going to hold up the three fingers, and she knows that, like, that's the reason, like, we're out of here, no questions, and we'll talk about it afterwards. But like, what are your, like, secret codes or whatever, like, to make sure that you're establishing that in the front end is a really important thing to do. And we've done that again in business. We've done that in other situations, but being able to take some of those practices that may work great in like program management or project management, be like, hey, let's apply those here and see if they work, right?
Right. Also, how about organizers make an announcement and send out an announcement in every way possible? Get this message out that this is unacceptable behavior. And if it's discovered that you participated in this, that you contributed to a woman or a person not feeling safe at an event in any way, you will be banned from that event.
And this is what's going to happen as a result. Yeah.
And we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it. Right? So for so long, I mean, I think about it like the Me Too movement. I mean, I'm just still shocked after that this continues because nobody wanted to talk about it because they were worried. I mean, somebody like Meryl Streep knew it was going on. She knew it was going on and didn't say anything. Right? So we're at this point now where there are enough people know that it happens. Enough people in our industry, prominent people, conference organizers, event planners, all know. And more importantly, the vendors who sponsor these events know that it goes on. Some of them are culprits.
And some of them are actively doing things to prevent it from happening, right? Like I've talked to a couple leaders who have said, we have drink tickets, not because we're trying to throttle the alcohol at the event, but when you only get 2 drink tickets, like I don't need that to be like it checks people's behavior, and I don't want to be complicit. And like somebody came and had 20 shots, right? Like that's not right. And so me as a vendor, you know, I could do this type of thing to be able to help protect things too. And it's just like being able to share, I think, the things that might help or work, right, from these different personas of individuals. Well, whether you're a vendor who's got a presence at events, whether you're a speaker, whether you're a participant, or whether you're like operations of running an event, right? Like there might be different lenses that we look through for these things that you might encounter more predominantly from one of the specific lenses, but like, and then how are we going to mitigate that, or how are we going to prevent that from happening? And it's one of the hard things is if we don't talk about it, we don't know, you know, like if we don't specifically say like these are the areas where something bad happened, you know, it just makes it really tough. And there's also a hesitancy of sharing names, right? And I know I was very hesitant about sharing names for what happened to me and like who hurt me. And
I haven't shared names. I haven't shared names either. So
yeah. Well, and the interesting thing, Rayanne, is when I shared the name with an individual who was running an event of what had happened to me, they ended up taking that and talking to some of the other event providers, and it came out that there were way more victims from this very specific person. And it's just like that, you know, we also have to change the narrative of like, how do we share names or individuals to prevent this from happening to somebody else? Right? Because like, I know for me, I was like, oh, I'm going to change, like, I'm only going to have 1 drink. I'm not going to drink, right? I'm not going to do this. I'm going to make sure that I stay away from that person. I'm not going to go to conferences if that person's there. If that person's going to be there, I'm going to see if my fiance can come, right? Just so I have a protection part. Yeah, we change, but we don't share that, like, right? To say like, hey, by the way, this happened. And I don't feel comfortable going to your event because this happened. Being able to, again, like normalize that behavior and figure out how do we do that and model it. I think it's really important to do.
So I made excuses for years to not go to parties. My company paid me to be here. They paid me to work here. They didn't pay me to party here. So I would go back to my room, not go to any events where I could meet with my friends and enjoy some downtime. Because if you are a vendor, not an attendee, this happens to both. But if you're, and in my case, I was a vendor at each of these, that you work so hard. The build up to it is a lot of work. You work so hard while you're there. You're on your feet from 6 until whenever every night. And it's nice to be able to go and sit with friends and have a glass of wine or a glass of water or a diet soda, or whatever it is that you choose to drink. And in your case, Jenny, it didn't matter. You weren't drinking alcohol. And I think we need to be really cognizant of the fact that this is not just happening to people who drink. This is not just happening to people who party. This is not just happening to women who show their cleavage. This is not just I mean, it is happening to anyone who maybe appears susceptible to whoever's committing the crime.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
So
and the other thing that I just wrote down that I know, and I know we're like close to time, but when something is subjective, the only way to be able to understand if we've crossed a line is to ask the right sharp questions, right? And what I'm referring to is consent. So what somebody is going to consent towards, like that's subjective to the individual person. What are my guardrails versus what are Rayanne's guardrails versus what is somebody else's guardrails? Like those are going to be subjected to them based on their own like lived experiences and again, what they're comfortable with. We're not trying to shame or blame anybody here, but the only way to understand if a boundary has been crossed or if we're going from, green to yellow and yellow to red for that individual person is to ask, right? Because it is not one size fits all, much like the systems that we build in technology, right? People are not one size fits all. What's good is not one size fits all. What's bad is not one size fits all. And so we have to really start normalizing being able to talk about that and being able to ask too, like, hey, are you okay? Just, you want to come over here and being able to put that lens on too, of like, who's not present here or who might be on their own at an event, right? Like if I'm on my own as a practitioner or a vendor and like, I don't have a friend there, I don't maybe have a buddy and being able to like, hey, like we called it Orphans Christmas at one of the HR conferences. And we're just like, if anybody's solo or doesn't have somebody here, like meet us at this bar and like, we're going to build our own kind of like support group. And
Isle of Misfits, the Isle of Misfits.
Yeah, and that's okay. And it's also you're able to meet people too. And so I just want to thank you for like starting this conversation. I know for those of you who are listening, this hasn't been the most linear thing. And guess what? That's okay. Because this is something that, again, we haven't talked about historically. It's not going to come out perfect. The solutions that we have for like how we're going to fix it, the only way that we're going to get it right is by building it together. It's got to be us versus the problem instead of you versus me. And so, Rayanne, thank you so much for leveraging your platform to have this conversation.
Thank you, Jay, for joining me today. This is going to be the first of many conversations. This for sure will not end here. And I want to leave everybody with just stay aware of what's going on around you, because it can, like I started this conversation with, it just happened to me in a Target parking lot, right? It just happened where I felt extremely unsafe. Somebody rolled up in a car, made comments to me, and it was scary and shocking, right? And we need to remove the shock and be prepared with a response.
And being able to share to other people, like, hey, this happened, it didn't feel good. And like not shaming yourself of like, oh, I shouldn't feel that way. I know it's just normal, right? Like anybody listening to this conversation, whether you're man, you're woman, you're non-binary, right? Like you deserve to feel safe in your own skin. And if somebody is making you feel less than or in a way that doesn't feel right,
it's like, not even an easy thing to recognize. And it's not even an easy thing to recognize that that's how I feel. Mm-hmm. This person is, because we've gone along with it for so long, that it feels normal, right? It feels normal to be harassed. It feels It feels normal. So before we leave, one last thing. I want you to explain why purple light.
Yeah. So where I am in Minnesota, we have these emergency lights that are on campuses and in parking lots, and they're blue lights. And so if you are in a situation where you don't feel safe, you can hit one of these blue lights and help will come to you, right? And so the idea was taking that same concept, but having a purple light. And what we're doing is we're building a digital advocacy experience that has a lot of different methods to it, but it's all centered around the human specifically, to help them be able to access resources or help in those what we're defining as moments that matter. So they don't feel safe. Something happened to them. Like, how do I understand where's a doctor's office, like that? And if I'm in an event in a place that I'm not familiar with, or hey, I was drugged, what do I do now? Right? Like, or something,
so
being able to share resources to that person in those moments that matter, but then also allow them to get access to help too, is kind of our goal. And so that the idea of using that same concept of like a purple light instead of a blue light was where it came from. And somebody said, it's like Operation Purple Light, and it just kind of stuck. And we're really, really thankful for the vendors that have committed, their time, their energy, their technology to being able to solve this problem. And one of the most crazy things with all of this is we have not experienced people who have said, oh, this isn't a problem, right? Like, it's mind-blowing because everybody's admitting, yes, it's a problem. Yes, we want to fix it. Tell me how, right? Like, count me in, right? And which is amazing. And it gives me faith in humanity, and faith in our ability to be able to do something, right? Like, so again, the blueprint for how we're going to solve this, it's going to evolve. It has to evolve. It has to continue to evolve because we're going to have to sharpen it to get it right. And we're going to be building, user experiences, much like we do in our world of work. We anticipate how they're going to be able to be used, but there might be use cases we haven't even thought of that we'll end up building out in the future. But we have to make sure that we're remaining agile and listening to feedback too. And this is a building with and building for.
Love it. Well, thank you so much. Again, first of many conversations here on The Edge and elsewhere. I hope everybody knows that they can contribute to this conversation, that if they want to reach out to either myself or Jenny privately and want to share their story, please do so. If folks want to reach you, what's the best way, Jenny?
LinkedIn.
Yep, so just look for Jenifer Cotie Kangas. She's the only one. And reach out to her or myself. I'm surely the only Rayanne Thorn Krueger as well. We're happy to help in any way. Share your story. If you're interested in coming on and talking about your story, happy to do that. Hope you will join us again next time. Thanks again, Jenny. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking some time today to talk more about this really important topic.
Thank you. Happy holidays, everybody.
Take care.